glasses of water a day to survive. I don't remember ever drinking water. I don't think I ever did drink water. There was no water. Nobody gave you water. How do you survive? How do you manage? Well, anyway, I managed. And on May 9th, 1945, we were liberated by the American Army. And we were let go free. I remember leaving the camp very early in the morning with a bunch of friends who came from my home area. And we got out on the road and we started walking. And lo and behold, within 10 minutes, we walked into a patrol, an American patrol. And they made us stop and asked us who we were. And by the way, it was a black unit. And I have never seen a black person in my life before. And it's a funny thing, I never thought it to be unusual. I never found them to be any different. You know, that just shows that prejudice about people being different really is something that you really are being taught. It's not something that is in you. I didn't find them to be any different than I was. I thought they were American soldiers. The fact that they were black just didn't even enter my mind. But later on, when I got in touch with the white soldiers, they started making comments about blacks. And that's when you start hearing, oh, they are different, they are this, they are that. You know what I mean? Like they would be saying about Jews or about Polish or about whoever. So anyway, at that time, I had no idea what happened to my family. And after the war, by the way, I got sick from typhus. Most people, by the way, by the thousands of survivors died of typhus. So did my father. He was liberated in Buchenwald. And he died about a week or two after liberation from typhus. You know, we were infested with lice. That was the awesome, awesome condition. You know, here we get no nourishment and the lice are eating us, sucking our blood away. And for months, there was no way to get rid of them. And each one infected the other. We were sleeping all in the open. And what happened is that I got sick and I was in an Army field hospital for about 2 or 3 months. And I have no idea what happened through that period. But anyway, I must have gotten better, and I started the quest for finding out what happened to the family. And the way we did it is we traveled from capital to capital and staying at various shelters that were provided by the UNRWA, by the Joint, and by various organizations. They fed us and they gave us housing. And we also tried to run into people to find out maybe someone who came from your hometown. Maybe you saw my brother. Have you seen my sister? And so word by mouth, you usually found someone. Or you left your names on any space on a wall you could find, and then read the wall whenever you got there to see if your sister's or brother's name is on the. And there were rumors that someone saw my brother in Budapest, the next day found him in Bucharest. You kept running and traveling. One day, somebody told me that my brother was in Budapest, and I was in Prague. So I get on the train from Prague to Budapest, and I board the train, and there, the trains have a corridor, and then they have compartments. You've seen in the movies, I'm sure. And I looked for a compartment where I could sit down, and sure enough, I found a compartment, and I noticed that the seat I was going to sit on was kind of muddy. So I was looking around to clean it with something, and sure enough, a piece of crumpled paper was on the floor, and I pick it up, and lo and behold, I look at it, and there is my sister's name jumped at me. I opened the paper up, and it turned out to be a list of published by the Swedish Red Cross of the survivors who were taken for medical recuperation to Sweden. And she was listed on that list. And by the way, you know, you tell the story for a while, you keep telling it, and it is so unbelievable, the story, that after a while you don't believe. You know, maybe I made that up. Maybe it couldn't be. How can that? That's ridiculous. This is unbelievable story. Lo and behold, about 6 months ago, my son, who lives in New York City, works for the Jewish Museum, he found that piece of paper. Now, maybe not that piece, but he found that list, and he sent it to me on an email. And there she is, my sister. And then I realized it was true. I did not make that up. And I have that on my email. I have it on my record, that list. Can you imagine that? Well, anyway, later on, I met up with my brother at home, where I came originally. But by that time, that part of the country became Russia. Now, that was the last place I wanted to go to. I didn't want to settle in Russia. I didn't want to go back to Russia. You heard things about Russians. You know, they themselves suffered so terribly. They were victims of this war as much as the Jews were. You know, they killed millions of them. And they didn't have the same sympathy and feeling about the Jewish victims as the Americans did, because they themselves were victimized, you know. And this is the last place you wanted to live. But I had to go home to meet my brother, number one. And number two, I also managed to get some, like a birth certificate. And also, what happened, I was a graduate of a very well-known, very famous gymnasium, which is a high school in Europe. They call it the gymnasium. It's an 8-year course. After elementary school, you enter a gymnasium. Now, the European system is such that at the age of 10 or 11, they determine your fate, whether you're going to go on the trade route or on the academic route. You have to pass an exam. And if you pass that exam successfully, you go on the academic route. If you don't pass it, you go on the trade route. In other words, you go to a school called Polgari. It's like a school where you get mixed academic and trade education. And then you become whatever you want to become. But if you go on the academic, then your chances are to get a high school education and eventually end up to go to a university. So what happened is that we managed to get a hold of the yearbook of my gymnasium graduation. And that yearbook with the picture on it then served me as a evidence of having completed a high school, and I was admitted to the Charles University Medical School in Prague a year later as a result of that. And because of that admission to the Charles University, that served me as an evidence to get a scholarship to come to the United States. I received a scholarship, you know, I'm telling you about luck all the way, luck about the survival, luck about getting anywhere. There were 70 scholarships handed out by B'nai B'rith International to all the people in the displaced persons camps. And I was one of the recipients. Can you imagine what a lucky... but you had to prove your high school background. And that picture and that evidence that I was admitted to Charles University served as evidence that I had a high school education. And then I was admitted to the University of Wisconsin on a conditional basis, because they didn't know, they didn't see grades, they didn't know anything about me, but it was conditional. If I hack it, if I make it, the first semester, you stay. If you don't, out you go. Unfortunately, I managed to make it, and I became a pharmacist. I was going to go to medical school, but they said you can't go to medical school. You have to go first get a bachelor's degree before you go that. But in Europe, you go to medical school directly from the gymnasium. But here, you have to have an undergraduate degree. So we decided, well, let's take pharmacy for the 4 years. And I opened my own pharmacy. I did very well. My pharmacy was on the south side. And I raised a very beautiful family. I don't know if you've seen them. I don't know if any of you know Matan, with his music and all that stuff. And his sister Ella just is visiting home from Australia on a medical program. Just finished her first year, and she's going to go there for 2 years and then finish off at Oxnard Medical College in New Orleans. And then I have a total of 7 grandchildren. And then I lost my wife, and I remarried, and I have another 3 grandchildren from the second marriage. So I have 10 most wonderful, loving, very caring family. So it's again, luck all the way. I got nothing but nachas. You know what nachas means? No? Anybody knows nachas? All right, nachas means the pleasure you get from your children and grandchildren, if you're lucky. And so that's my story.
Do you have any questions for Mr. Koplin?
Yes.
What camps were you in well, first you were in the military camp sort of thing, right? In where you lived, and then you went to a different concentration camp?
No, Mauthausen was a concentration camp. Now, the displaced persons camp was after the war, where the Germans provided shelter and temporary residence for the survivors in Germany, but we were free. I mean, this is a displaced person, that's a different story. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, I worked for the Joint while I was in Germany, and I accompanied many of those transports that kept coming. There was, even after the war, when some people thought they could go back to their hometowns and start life over again like it was before. And they found out that they did not want them. And as a matter of fact, there's a city called Kielce, and there was a Kielce pogrom after the war, and they killed, I think, 10 or 15 Jews in one night because they demanded their houses back, which belonged to them, and they wouldn't give it back to them. So there was a tremendous onslaught of all those people who have thought they might settle in Europe again, started coming into Germany. And that's when I accompanied many of those transports to various displaced persons camps that the American army set up. But those were strictly temporary until they most people found an eventual final emigration site. Most of them went to Israel, many of them came to America, many of them went to South America. So that was a different story. Yes?
Did you get a tattoo of the number on your arm when you went to the concentration camp? A number tattoo?
A number.
She wants to know if you have a tattoo.
Okay. Now, only people who went to Auschwitz were given numbers. If you did not go to Auschwitz, you were not given numbers. See, and besides, I ended up, in Mauthausen the last 3 months of the war. Mm-hmm. By that time, they didn't give numbers. So the only ones, my brother, for example, has a number because he went to Auschwitz. I thank God I never went there, which I'm very glad about. It was an awesome experience. Yes.
So, you said that a death march was to like, for death, to kill, like, as many people as quickly as they can.
A little bit louder.
He's asking you about a death march.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, you said that they were made to kill as many people as quickly as they could.
He's asking about the purpose of the death
like,
march. Was it to
well,
kill as
yeah, I
many
guess-
as possible?
Now, you have to remember,
That's what-
they couldn't kill, they developed tremendous efficiency in killing people. They developed it in Auschwitz. But there were so many people that they couldn't kill them all. So there were always people left over at the time, and the war was almost ending, and they didn't know what to do with them. So they let them just march and die on the way. That was just another way of killing. The death march was intended to really kill off whatever left.
You said that, like, if you didn't get up, then you were shot in the head, and so why didn't they just, like, shoot you even if you did get up?
They
Because
did shoot. They did shoot. I remember going through a path in the Alps, and suddenly we know the shooting going on. And what happened, they set up machine guns, and as the people were marching, they just started shooting. Whoever made it through, whoever didn't. And then at the end, this was the oddest event. That same night, we ended up in a place that they provided shelter and provided us with a very nice meal, the first time in days, a nice meal. But then at the end of the meal, they asked for volunteers to go and pick all the dead bodies on the road. And you see, there's another, it was always nice to be small. You know, every day while I was in the camp on the Austro-Hungarian border, every morning some people died during the night. And what they did is they took the corpses and dumped them outside the tent. And then every morning they asked for volunteers to move these dead bodies on carts and move them away. They never chose me because I was little, I was hiding. You know, they always chose the big guys to do the job. So that was another thing. It was good to be, you know, inconspicuous and small. You know, that helped very much.
why did they still beat you?
Yeah, I was wondering that
Yeah.
also.
Why-
If it was a death march, why did they? I know.
Still
Why did they like take the effort to give you guys food if the purpose was to kill
I
you?
knew you could, things were happening, you could
Were they
never
just,
figure
like,
out
were some of them,
what
like, guilty
happened.
and
You see, there were conflicting reports too at the time. There were allegedly reports where the high command issued orders, let the Jews be. It's over, practically over, let the Jews be. But the commanders on the field didn't follow through. So depending upon who the commander was, if he really hated the Jews, he just continued to punish them. If he didn't hate them, they did provide them with some help. You know, it all
Also, I
depended. It was
think
very.
some might have been afraid with the liberators coming in. At the end, were some trying
Right,
to
right.
also.
There's a whole
They want things to look
publication
as bad at the end.
about this, about the Death March, an official publication, as the conflicting orders that came in. It was already at the end anyway. Why they continued to punish us? And they knew that they would, you know, might be punished for it too. And yet they continued. The hate against the Jew was so overwhelming and so inbred in their psyche that was the most important thing. Winning the war even became secondary, just so you kill more Jews. That's what happens.
We want to thank you so much for returning. This is the first time I've ever had the same survivor, someone come back and speak to you again, but Mr. Koplin's unbelievable. You know, I have just tremendous respect. I consider you so much sharper at your age than I am.
Thank you.
And I know again that these students will remember because they're studying a lot. For 9 weeks they study, and it's not the same as hearing someone who's lived through it. So we very much appreciate you. We know it's not easy.
So it goes. Thank you.